Here's the truth. Comfort is killing your potential. Every time you choose the easy way out, you shrink your strength, your confidence, and your future. Growth doesn't come from what feels safe. It comes from what feels hard. The struggle you're avoiding is the exact thing that would change your life. So if it scares you, if it challenges you, if it forces you to rise, run toward it. Because the version of you that's unstoppable, he's built on the other side of hard things. The human brain does not grow stronger through comfort. It evolves when faced with challenge. Every time we experience something hard, mentally, physically, or emotionally, our nervous system kicks into high alert. This state of heightened attention tells the brain that something important is happening. Neural pathways begin to adjust as a response to this perceived urgency. It is in those moments of effort, confusion, or fear that new synaptic connections are formed. The discomfort isn't a sign of weakness. It's a signal of change. We're conditioned to think pain is a problem, but biologically, it's often the beginning of transformation. Growth is not passive, it's triggered through adversity. Each time you push beyond what feels manageable, you literally upgrade your brain. The discomfort is not a failure, it's the gateway to your next level. When a person tackles something difficult, a shift occurs deep within the brain structure. This shift is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change. But neuroplasticity doesn't happen when things are easy or familiar. It activates when the system is under pressure and has to rewire itself to survive or succeed. Repeating easy tasks doesn't build new circuits, it only reinforces old ones. But struggling with a new skill, facing a hard truth, or enduring a physical challenge all demand change at the cellular level. The brain must create new pathways to meet the demands of that challenge. That's how you grow. Not just mentally, but emotionally and physically. Your brain becomes sharper, your reactions quicker, your endurance higher. None of that happens in the comfort zone. Struggle is the invitation to expand. Most people reject it because it's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is precisely the signal that something powerful is unfolding. When you voluntarily enter hard situations, whether that's starting a new routine, having a tough conversation, or committing to a demanding goal, you're telling your brain, this matters. That message heightens focus and fuels adaptation. Avoiding hard things, on the other hand, tells your brain that effort isn't necessary and growth stalls. There's a reason elite performers intentionally put themselves in discomfort. They understand the biology behind growth. They know that when something feels difficult, the nervous system becomes activated. This activation sharpens awareness and prepares the brain to encode new information. In essence, difficulty is the training ground for greatness. The brain interprets challenge as a learning signal. Just like lifting weights breaks muscle fibers so they can rebuild stronger, doing hard things breaks old mental patterns so new ones can form. Every struggle rewires you. But this process requires one essential ingredient: deliberate action. Growth doesn't come from chaos. It comes from structured resistance. This means choosing your challenges and engaging with them intentionally. When you consciously face hard things, your brain registers it differently than when you're overwhelmed or reactive. It sees it as training, not trauma. This distinction is critical because growth only occurs when the system feels both pressure and control. That combination creates the perfect storm for adaptation. You're not just enduring, you're evolving. The most profound change happens when effort meets resistance. If you repeat something that's too easy, there's no reason for your brain to adapt. If you take on something overwhelmingly hard, your system may shut down or panic. But when the challenge is just outside your comfort zone, difficult enough to stretch you, but within reach, your brain goes into learning mode. That sweet spot is called the neuroplasticity threshold. It's where discomfort turns into capability. The key is staying in that zone long enough for change to take root. The repetition of intentional effort in this state strengthens neural connections. You literally become more capable over time. The hard things you once feared become habits, and the impossible becomes routine. People often mistake growth for achievement, but real growth happens in the invisible moments, when no one is watching, and you're quietly choosing the hard path. It's in the early mornings when you get up to train despite the fatigue. It's in the silence when you sit with your own thoughts instead of distracting yourself. It's in the setbacks when you decide to keep going instead of quitting. Each of those decisions may seem small, but they're massive to your brain. Every act of effort builds internal evidence that you are strong, adaptable, and capable. Over time, that changes your identity. You're not just someone who survives hard things. You become someone who seeks them because you understand their value. The power of growth lies in the brain's ability to adapt. But adaptation requires repetition. It's not enough to do something hard once and walk away. Change comes from showing up again and again, even when progress is invisible. This repeated effort sends a signal to your brain. This matters enough to fight for. And the brain responds by reorganizing itself to meet that demand. Neural circuits strengthen, behavior becomes more automatic, and confidence grows from within. That's the science behind consistency. It's not just about discipline, it's about rewiring your nervous system. Each rep, each step, each challenge compounds over time. The process is slow, but it's how excellence is built. Doing hard things also improves your ability to regulate emotion. When you expose yourself to difficulty, you learn to manage your internal state. That means you don't panic under pressure, you don't break when things go wrong, and you don't quit when you're tired. Your emotional threshold increases. You begin to separate discomfort from danger, and that distinction makes you powerful. Most people confuse stress with weakness, but stress is what makes you stronger if you use it correctly. Through intentional exposure to hard things, your mind learns to stay calm in chaos. You train yourself to breathe, focus, and execute, even when it hurts. That skill is not just useful, it's life-changing. Ultimately, growth from hard things is not about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering what was already inside you. The challenge doesn't create your strength, it reveals it. Every time you face difficulty, you learn a little more about your limits and how far beyond them you can go. The pain strips away the noise and exposes your raw potential. In those moments of strain, fear, or fatigue, something deeper emerges. Not just discipline or focus, but identity. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. The journey isn't easy, but that's the point. Growth doesn't come to those who wait for the right conditions. It comes to those who are willing to fight through the wrong ones. So the next time life gives you something hard, don't pull back. Lean in. Not because it's comfortable, but because that discomfort is the path forward. Inside every hard thing is a lesson, a skill, a strength you haven't yet unlocked. The resistance is not your enemy, it's your invitation. Every challenge is a chance to become more than you were yesterday. Your brain is waiting for that signal. Send it. Choose the thing that forces you to stretch. Commit to what scares you. Take the step that demands more than you think you have. Because growth isn't given, it's earned. And the currency is doing the hard things most people avoid. When we go through hard things, the natural instinct is to seek relief, to wait for the reward to show up after the struggle ends. But the truth is, the real power comes when you learn to enjoy the effort itself. Inside your brain, there's a powerful chemical called dopamine, often labeled as the feel-good neurotransmitter. Most people think it only kicks in after a victory, after you hit the goal or get the applause. But dopamine isn't just about the result. You can actually train your brain to release it during the process. When you learn to find meaning and satisfaction in the challenge itself, your brain rewards you for the work, not just the win. That changes everything. It means the journey becomes fuel, not frustration. This ability to access dopamine during difficulty gives you a massive edge. If you're only motivated by outcomes, you'll burn out fast. Results take time and setbacks are inevitable. But if you can link your internal reward system to effort, you create a self-sustaining engine. Every step forward, no matter how small, becomes a source of energy. Your mind begins to associate hard work with pleasure instead of pain. That shift rewires how you perceive challenge. Instead of avoiding what's difficult, you start to crave it. It becomes the proving ground, the place where you feel most alive. You stop waiting to feel good later, you feel good now, because you know you're growing. The way to unlock this shift is through mindset and meaning. If you attach deep personal value to what you're doing, even when it's hard, your brain interprets that work as important. This triggers the release of neurochemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in the moment. These substances increase focus, enhance memory, and regulate mood. The difficult task suddenly feels worth doing, not because it's easy, but because it's meaningful. That meaning becomes your internal reward system. You're not chasing a trophy, you're chasing transformation. The brain loves challenge when it's paired with purpose. And when purpose fuels effort, you become nearly unstoppable. Most people live in a reward-delayed loop. They think, I'll be happy when I get the job, hit the weight, make the money. But living like that trains the brain to be unhappy in the present. It reinforces the idea that effort equals suffering and reward equals happiness. Over time, motivation drops because the brain sees struggle as punishment. But when you reverse that pattern, when you start to celebrate the grind, the sweat, the setbacks, you rewire that loop. Now, effort equals progress. Progress equals satisfaction, and satisfaction shows up in the middle of the work, not just the end. That is what creates sustainable motivation. Every time you do something hard and tell yourself, this is where I grow, you're reinforcing the right circuits. That simple shift in internal dialogue changes your chemistry. It makes the grind feel like purpose instead of punishment. The task doesn't get easier, but your relationship to it does. You stop resisting the discomfort, and instead you start leaning into it. The brain loves patterns, and if you keep pairing hard work with a sense of reward, even something as small as a breath, a smile, or a mental yes, those patterns become hardwired. Now, the pain of effort becomes the signal of improvement, not something to run from. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending hard things aren't hard. It's about training your nervous system to see the value in adversity. That's not something you're born with. It's something you build. Each time you face resistance and push forward with intention, your brain starts to respond differently. Over time, challenge begins to feel familiar, not frightening. You learn to expect the discomfort, and eventually, you find a strange satisfaction in it. Because you know what it means. You're leveling up. That realization alone creates a chemical reward system that reinforces the very behavior that once scared you. Now the hard thing becomes the doorway to your best self. The internal reward system also protects you against burnout. When you're only chasing external wins, you're constantly measuring progress by things outside your control. That creates stress, anxiety, and eventually fatigue. But when you're fueled from the inside, by purpose, by process, by growth, you become more resilient. You're no longer derailed by setbacks because your identity isn't tied to perfection, it's tied to persistence. That inner fire keeps you going when things get dark, because the motivation isn't based on outcome, it's based on effort. And effort is always within your control. That's a kind of freedom most people never experience. Rewiring your reward system takes conscious effort. It begins with catching the small wins, recognizing effort, not just outcome. When you run that extra mile, make that uncomfortable call, or stay focused a little longer, acknowledge it. Tell your brain this matters, this is growth. Those moments, repeated daily, start to stack. Over time, your brain will begin to seek more challenge because it's been trained to associate that challenge with reward. That's when transformation happens. You no longer need motivation from the outside because the motivation is built into the process. You've taught your brain to value the pursuit, not just the prize. When you master this internal system, life starts to feel different. You begin to understand that every obstacle is an opportunity, not just a test. Every hard moment is a chance to get better, sharper, stronger. You don't avoid pain anymore. You learn from it. You don't fear failure. You use it. You stop hoping for things to be easier and start hoping to get better. This mindset, paired with the neurochemical feedback loop of effort and reward, is what separates those who endure from those who excel. Growth becomes a lifestyle, not a phase. It's no longer about waiting for the right conditions. It's about building the right chemistry. The path forward isn't about avoiding struggle. It's about embracing it with the right perspective. Every difficult thing you do sends a message to your brain. I can handle this. I'm capable of more. That message builds confidence, discipline, and momentum. The more often you reinforce it, the stronger those pathways become. Eventually, doing hard things doesn't feel like punishment, it feels like purpose. And in that moment, you realize you've changed. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. Because you stopped chasing comfort and started chasing growth. That's when everything shifts. That's when hard things stop breaking you and start building you. Not all stress is destructive. Some of it is exactly what the brain and body need to grow. The difference lies in perception. When a person sees a challenge as something they can influence, even if it's tough, their mind interprets the stress as an opportunity to rise. This triggers a very different physiological response than when they feel helpless or overwhelmed. In states of control, stress becomes stimulating. It sharpens focus, boosts energy, and prepares the body for performance. But in states of no control, stress can feel crushing, draining the mind and body, leading to burnout or shutdown. The challenge itself doesn't change. The mindset and approach do. That's why doing hard things with intention and ownership is so important. You're not just surviving stress, you're shaping how it affects you. Growth lives on the side of effort combined with agency. The nervous system is constantly asking one key question: am I safe or threatened? When we feel in control of what we're doing, even if it's difficult, the system leans towards safety. This doesn't mean there's no stress, but it's the productive kind that prepares you for action. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and your mind sharpens. These are not signs of danger, they're signals of readiness. But if you face the same hard task and feel like you have no say in the outcome, your brain perceives it as a threat. Now the body produces stress hormones in a different ratio, and instead of focus, you get fog. Instead of energy, you get fatigue. Control isn't about eliminating hardship, it's about owning your response. Every time you confront something hard and choose how you engage with it, you strengthen your inner system. That conscious choice sends a message to the brain: I am not powerless. And that belief activates circuits tied to motivation, resilience, and problem solving. You become more capable not because the task gets easier, but because your perception of it becomes stronger. The more often you face difficulty with this mindset, the more your nervous system adapts to challenge. It begins to recognize stress not as a threat, but as a signal for growth. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's built rep by rep, moment by moment. But the impact is massive. What once triggered panic now sparks presence. What used to drain you now drives you. People often underestimate how powerful small doses of controlled stress can be. Things like cold exposure, intense workouts, public speaking, or difficult conversations are all stressors. But when chosen deliberately, they build resilience. That's because the nervous system adapts to repeated exposure. If you regularly place yourself in uncomfortable situations on purpose, your tolerance grows. You teach your body and brain how to handle intensity without shutting down. Over time, your baseline shifts. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. And that shift doesn't just affect those specific situations, it transfers to life as a whole. You begin to approach all forms of stress with more confidence and control. That's how hard things make you stronger, not just mentally but biologically. The trick isn't to avoid stress, but to dose it wisely. Too much, too fast, with no control, can overwhelm even the strongest system. But the right amount of challenge, met with focused effort, creates the perfect storm for transformation. This is called hormesis, a process where small, controlled stressors lead to long-term strength. It's true for the body and equally true for the mind. Just like muscles grow by being pushed and then recovering, the brain grows by facing strain and then integrating the lesson. The balance between pressure and recovery is key. If you never push, you never grow. If you never rest, you break. But in the right cycle, you build something unshakable. What makes stress harmful is not always the situation, it's the story we tell ourselves about it. If a task feels hard but meaningful, we can endure almost anything. But when a challenge feels meaningless or forced upon us, we resist it with everything we've got. That resistance is what makes stress feel unbearable. When you choose your challenge, when you define your why, and when you accept the effort, it transforms. It becomes something you can engage with rather than escape from. This doesn't erase the discomfort, but it gives it purpose. And purpose has the power to neutralize fear. Purpose fuels action, and action rewires perception. Every time you act despite resistance, you're training yourself to face life instead of flee from it. Hardship without control creates trauma, but hardship with ownership creates transformation. The same stimulus, a loss, a failure, a rejection, can either break someone or build them. The outcome depends on how the experience is processed. If you believe there's something you can do, some choice to make, some step to take, your mind adapts. It organizes the experience into something useful, something to learn from. But if you feel powerless, the experience becomes overwhelming and lingers in the system like a wound. That's why agency is everything. Taking ownership doesn't mean you caused the problem. It means you choose how to respond. And that choice is what allows healing, growth, and strength to take root. The nervous system learns through repetition. Each time you engage with a hard thing and stay present, you're teaching your brain that stress doesn't mean danger. That pattern builds new circuitry. Eventually, your tolerance expands and your threshold for discomfort increases. You stop bracing for pain and start working through it. You no longer see challenge as something to fear, but something to use. This kind of mental conditioning separates those who crack under pressure from those who rise under it. Hi, I'm Chris McEwen, Director of Culture and Design at NoCG Hub. I'm joined by It's not about natural talent, it's about trained capacity. You build that capacity by facing what's hard with focus, with intention, and with the belief that you can grow through it. There is a certain kind of confidence that can only be earned in the fire of adversity. It's not loud or flashy, it's steady. It comes from knowing that you've done the hard thing before and you can do it again. That belief doesn't come from wishing or waiting. It comes from taking action even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Every time you choose discipline over ease, courage over comfort, growth over fear, you shape who you are. And more importantly, you shape how your brain responds to future stress. Over time, your identity aligns with resilience. You become the kind of person who doesn't fold under pressure, but becomes sharper because of it. The goal isn't to eliminate all hard things from life. That's impossible. The goal is to build the kind of system, mental, emotional, physical, that can handle hard things without breaking. The world doesn't get easier, but you can get stronger. That's the real advantage. The hard things aren't the enemy, they're the teachers. They show you where you need to grow, what you need to face, and who you're becoming. When you combine stress with control, challenge with purpose, effort with ownership, you don't just endure the storm, you use it. And that's how transformation begins. Not when life gets easy, but when you get powerful. The experiences you endure shape the story your brain tells you about who you are. Every hardship you face and every challenge you overcome become part of your identity, not because they were easy, but because you got through them. The nervous system records struggle like a black box, storing the data for future reference. When you push through fear, fatigue, or doubt, your brain tags those memories as proof of capability. It remembers that you didn't quit, that you stood your ground, and that you kept going. These moments become internal evidence of strength. Over time, that evidence rewires how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who avoids difficulty and start identifying as someone who's built to rise. You don't just feel strong, you know you are. Avoidance, on the other hand, teaches the opposite lesson. Every time you retreat from something hard, you reinforce a message that you can't handle it. Even if no one else sees it, your brain does. It records avoidance and begins associating discomfort with threat. That means the next time something difficult appears, your system is already primed to shut down. Your confidence drops, your threshold shrinks, and your belief in your ability to face adversity weakens. It's not because you're incapable, it's because you've trained your identity to expect collapse. The truth is, every decision you make under pressure is a vote for the kind of person you become. Endure, and you cast a vote for resilience. Retreat, and you cast a vote for fear. The most powerful identity is built in silence, not in the spotlight, not in front of an audience, but in the dark, quiet moments when no one is watching and you choose not to quit. The brain doesn't just remember victories, it remembers the fight. It stores the way you showed up, the way you breathed through discomfort, and the way you kept your focus when it would have been easier to walk away. These moments compound. They form a narrative that your system begins to believe, and that belief becomes your baseline. Suddenly, things that used to shake you don't even make you flinch. You become grounded, not because life is easy, but because your identity has been shaped by fire. Endurance rewires your internal language. You stop saying things like, "I can't handle this," and start thinking, "I've been through worse." That shift in language creates a shift in chemistry. Your nervous system regulates itself faster, your focus sharpens more quickly, and your decisions become more intentional. Identity isn't something you declare, it's something you prove through action. The more you show up for yourself in hard moments, the more you align with the kind of person who thrives under pressure. It's not about being fearless, it's about recognizing fear and acting anyway. That process redefines self-image. You begin to trust yourself more. You start believing that no matter what life throws at you, you can respond. There's a type of confidence that no amount of praise or affirmation can replace. It's the kind you earn by doing what you thought you couldn't do. When you face something brutal and choose not to run, you unlock a piece of your potential that was hidden. That piece becomes a permanent part of you. It doesn't matter how small the win is. What matters is that you earned it under pressure. The accumulation of those moments, day after day, is what makes you unshakable. Confidence doesn't come from ease. It comes from exposure to difficulty, repeated effort, and the knowledge that you endured. When your nervous system gets used to showing up under stress, confidence becomes your default, not your reward. We often think of identity as fixed, but it's actually fluid. It's shaped by the choices you make every day, especially when those choices are hard. When you keep promises to yourself in the face of discomfort, you earn self-respect. That self-respect reinforces discipline, discipline builds momentum, and momentum builds belief. Every time you push through something challenging, you reinforce a message that you are capable, focused, and strong. Those aren't just traits, they're neural circuits being built and strengthened. Your brain begins to default to action instead of hesitation, to focus instead of fear, and eventually that becomes who you are, not just in your head, but in your biology. The reason doing hard things is so transformative is because it demands your full presence. There's no autopilot in adversity. You're forced to focus, to breathe, to adjust, and to grow. That level of presence forges clarity. In those moments, you meet parts of yourself that you've never seen. You uncover reserves of strength, creativity, and resolve that only show up when you're under pressure. Those discoveries stay with you. They become anchors in future storms. When life tries to shake you, you don't just remember that you've survived. You remember who you became in the process. You carry that identity with you like armor. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes you stronger. Hardships also strip away false identities. They expose the difference between who you think you are and who you really are. That gap can be uncomfortable, but it's honest. And honesty is where real transformation starts. When you're broken down by something hard and you choose to rebuild anyway, you're building something real. You're not pretending anymore. You're not hiding behind titles or comfort zones. You're facing the raw material of your character and shaping it through action. That process builds authenticity. You stop performing for others and start performing for your own growth. You stop needing validation because you validated yourself through effort, through endurance, and through fire. The beauty of identity built through hard things is that it becomes unshakable. External factors may change, jobs, relationships, finances, but the internal system remains steady. Because you know who you are when everything falls apart. You've met yourself in the hardest places and proven your ability to keep going. That kind of inner knowing is priceless. It makes you harder to manipulate, harder to break, and harder to stop. You move through life with a quiet intensity, not loud, not boastful, but deeply rooted in truth. And that truth comes from a history of effort, a history of pushing when it hurt, showing up when it was inconvenient, and refusing to quit when everything in you screamed to stop. At the end of the day, the hardest things you've been through aren't just scars. They're signatures. They're the marks of the battles that built you. And when you look back, you'll see that those moments didn't just challenge your limits, they expanded them. They taught you to rely on yourself, to trust your resilience, and to carry a mindset that thrives in discomfort. You don't grow by watching others do the hard thing. You grow by doing it yourself. And in that process, you don't just build strength, you build identity. Not a mask, not a version curated for approval, but the real, tested, unbreakable you. The kind of identity forged through fire and ready for anything.